Boop. Happy Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, October 21st, 2020, and we're back with another DBR from the Wesley Center at Chattanooga. Today's daily Bible readings come to us from Psalm 63, 1 through 8, Numbers 13, 1 through 2, and then 17 through 14, 9, Matthew 17, 22 through 27, or you could have read Psalm 98, Daniel 6, 1 through 28, and then Matthew 17, 22 through 27. And I am going to look at Daniel today and talk about politics and the law, but I'm going to start by talking about a bunch of satraps. What's a satrap? So in the kingdom that Daniel lived in, which was, led by this guy named King Darius, satraps were like the people that ran his country for him. So he was in charge, he was the king, but then he had a bunch of little governors and mayors and stuff like that. They were the politicians that really ran the country. So here's the story. The political leaders, all these other satraps, hated Daniel because he was one of these guys, and actually he was over most of them, who ran the country. And the reason why they hated him so much was because he did his job really, really well. And his job was kind of, as it says in the text, protect the king from loss. And he did that really, really well, which, if the other guys hate him for that, it should make you wonder what they were really trying to do. Like, were they interested in protecting the king? Because you would think if somebody else was doing that job really well and making their job easier, they'd be all for him. But apparently they weren't. So because of this, they really hated him. And they basically hated him because of the kind of person he was. They hated him because he did his job well, and the person he was contributed to that. We're told in the text that Daniel distinguished himself above all because he was one of an excellent spirit was in him. So he had an excellent spirit within him. So, God. So they hate him and they know they got to get rid of him. They just want to get rid of him. And so they begin to looking around to see if they can trump up some charges against him. And so because they absolutely couldn't stand him, because he was getting in their way and getting all the attention, specifically the king's attention. King apparently really liked him, really liked Daniel, and thought he was a good guy. They started looking for, let's say, incriminating evidence. They were looking for a paper trail that would incriminate Daniel and show that, hey, he isn't really this guy of great spirit that you think. He isn't really out for your best interests. He's really playing dirty. And so, which is interesting because these guys knew what it meant to play dirty, I'm guessing, and so they knew what to look for, but they couldn't find it. They couldn't find it because we're told also that he was faithful and no negligence or corruption could be found in him. And so at the end of the story, well, not really the end of the story, but at the end of the part of the story that I'm going to focus on today, it's the ironic thing is that, let's say this. It was Daniel's dedication to God and to God's law that made him so useful to the king. All these character attributes were because Daniel was very, very much focused, not so much on being a person that the king loved, but he desperately wanted to be the kind of person that God loved. He wanted to be the kind of person that God called him to be, and so he was very dedicated to having the lessons of the law play out in his life, being like a person who had God's law written on his heart and his mind, as the scripture tells us. And that's why he was of so much use to the king. It wasn't like, he was concerned about the king, but he probably would have done a good job for anybody, whether or not they were a king of a great empire, because he was going to treat them the way God said that you should treat people. And so that's why he did such a great job. That's why there were no questions about corruption with him. That's why they couldn't find a paper trail, because he went out of his way to do the thing that God would have him to do. And ironically, that's what this bunch of little satraps used against him. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story. You'll have to read that on your own. It's a good story. You should read it. And anyway, that's the DBR for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good afternoon, a good evening. We'll see you later. Boop.